Niels is in the studio with us right now. Niels Hoe, great to see you. Thanks for coming on in.
My pleasure.
Paint a cyclist picture for us. What is Copenhagen like? Who cycles?
Basically, everybody cycles. It's my kids from the youngest one is 6 until the oldest person able to walk and cycle. It's everybody. It's in every type of clothes. It's any kind of profession. So everybody.
Princess Mary?
She's been seen cycling. Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yes.
Well, there was actually a picture of your transport minister, the Danish transport minister there, going off to a meeting, and you mentioned that his advisor cycling behind him. Obviously, there is a huge sense from the top down that this is just how you operate in a city.
It's just something we do. We don't do it because it's something. It's a statement. I think it's just something. You don't think about it. It's practical. It's convenient. It's often faster than transit or a car. So it's just common sense.
It's one thing to build bicycle infrastructure, and Kumi mentioned the enormous infrastructure in Copenhagen for bikes. It's another thing to nurture a cycling culture. How do you teach other transport users, i.e. drivers, to respect cyclists and the fact that this cycling culture is an integral part of transportation?
First of all, I think it's embedded in our culture, in our society, and almost any cyclist will also be a car driver at some point, and the opposite way. So we know the way around both as a car driver and a cyclist. It's just something we do. We teach our kids from age 3 or something to ride on 2 wheels. So it's no biggie. It's just something we do.
So for somewhere like Australia, Niels, where it's not necessarily embedded in our culture, as you say, our roads, all our cities are pretty much designed to be for cars, and in fact we have a Prime Minister at the moment who likes to call himself the infrastructure Prime Minister. It's about building roads, it's about getting people in cars, it's about getting people to work quickly. That culture isn't developed in Australia so much. Is it possible to turn back the clocks and redevelop a culture?
I think it is, but it will take a lot of courage and commitment from the political sides and funding, obviously. But we didn't do this overnight. We built on this culture for decades now. So it won't be something that you can do for next Monday or so. But it will take a lot of hard work and commitment, and obviously the funding, as I said. So it's possible.
We were talking about your transportation minister cycling. Recently, the state transport minister in New South Wales raised the possibility of having a licensing system for cyclists, that cyclists have to get a licence and maybe even be banned from some roads, he says, for their own safety, for cyclist safety, to cut down the number of cyclist deaths. In terms of promoting a culture, what good would a licensing system do, if any?
No good, I would say. I think that's a total wrong approach to it. It sends a signal that they're not welcoming. I think design and planning should be accommodating and embracing people and making them welcome on the roads. So I would say that's a definitely way to go if you don't want to become a cycling city or a nation even.
Niels, you were mentioning that it would take courage to change a culture like ours. Why do you say courage?
Because politically, obviously, the easy answer here might be supporting the cars, as I understand some of the parties do, because you have all the people in the cars already, so it's probably down their line to speak. So it would take courage, and maybe you need to prove that you can actually be re-elected on a positive strategy for cycling, and that's courage. It takes courage to put your political mandate on the board.
Is it easier to build a bicycle city, a city that embraces cycling, in a flat city? For example, in Australia, would it be an uphill battle, literally, to bring in this cycling culture in Sydney or Hobart or Brisbane, which has lots of hills, compared to, say, Adelaide or Melbourne in the centre of those cities? Yeah,
and my capital, Copenhagen, is a totally flat city, so I have all the advantages. But then maybe they should look into e-bikes, electrical-driven bikes that assist you a little bit, so you can get that little help uphill, so you don't get too sweaty when we're riding in our suits. So it's possible. There's other solutions for this.
Niels, apart from the cars versus bikes, healthy lifestyle aspects of cycling, what is life like when you cycle most of the time? Is it slower? Do you talk to people in a different way? Is the community around you different and more personal?
I think one of the reasons, like the Danes are one of the happiest nations on earth, is cycling plays a part in this. It's a way of making livable and great cities. And you do ride beside your partner or a friend or whatever and get to talk. And we even have something called conversations lines in Copenhagen, where they're made broader, so you can actually ride side by side and other people can overtake you without you being in conflict. So you can have this conversation, which is nice. If you meet people in a car, you can nod a little bit maybe if you see somebody across the street, right? That's what you can do.
No, we're beeping our horns and getting to get out of the way.
Cycle rage.
Yeah, exactly.
A chicken and egg question. In Copenhagen, what did come first? Was the bicycle infrastructure put in place and gradually that cycling culture built, or was there a cycling culture there and that courage you talk about, the political courage of putting funds into that? Did that then happen and the infrastructure was built to catch up to the culture? Which way did it go?
The last. As I said, it's been a long stretch. We are not at our historical highest in cycling numbers now. In the 20s and 30s, between the two world wars, we had higher numbers in Copenhagen on cyclists, simply because that's how you transported yourself, that or the tram. And then we saw post the Second World War with private system and cars taking over, and then the picture was turning in the late 60s and then building with infrastructure. But in the beginning, everybody just shared whatever space was available to them.
If you were to develop a campaign around getting people to cycle more, we see a lot of them in Australia around health and fitness and motorists taking care of cyclists. What is the best way to do that? Should the bicycle be promoted as the best way of a lifestyle? Like, how do you switch a culture into embracing different values?
Right. Of course, it's a sweet picture with we biking and you see our Prime Minister, whatever, on a bike, and it paints a good picture. But I think basically, campaigns should be positive. Instead of pointing out all the difficulties or the uncertainties or the safety risk and these things, I think you should have, if you have a positive focus, and again, this accommodating, embracing style and chosen of words, you can come far.
At a time when we're told to tighten our belts, so on the one hand, a bicycle sounds like a good idea. It cuts down the costs of running a motor vehicle. But at the same time, cyclists say, well, until that culture gets in place, we need safe places to cycle. There is a dilemma there for politicians. Do we put in place the infrastructure when we're telling people to tighten their belts? What do we do?
Obviously, I see the dilemma, but I think if you don't provide for the cyclists with the infrastructure and the parking and everything, they won't come out of themselves. Of course, they will. You won't be sitting at home saying, "Okay, now I start riding." Maybe out of the blue. So you need to be on the forehand of it and actually, make it possible. Provide for the cyclists, for them to come in higher numbers anyway.
Niels, one of the issues Australia has with nearly everything in terms of our infrastructure, telecommunications, travel, everything is the size of our country. When you look at somewhere like Copenhagen, beautiful, small, compact country, 1.2 million people in Copenhagen. We have 7 million in Sydney alone, spread out across such vast areas. How do you create a culture when essentially you will be cutting off probably a lot of the city, because it will have to be just that central part of each city, essentially, in the beginning at least, that is serviced. It's quite a difficult mix to find.
Of course, size will play a matter in this case, but it could be something with making it easier to commute from your home to the nearest train station, then go into transit, and then you get in here in the centre, you cover your last mile with a bike share or some type of other private bicycle or whatever you have there to cover the last mile, which makes the total travel time okay for you. Because, of course, if you live 20 kilometers out of Sydney, not a lot of people will ride that, and that's fair enough. I think that's not what the bike do.
Niels Hoe, a Danish cyclist, and here telling us how we could possibly build our cycling culture. Fascinating talking with you. Thanks so much for your time.
My pleasure.